Some new research has come out on prompting that is making some waves in the AI community. So, this research comes from an AI education company called LearnPrompting and researchers at OpenAI, Microsoft, Stanford, and a handful of other leading educational institutions. This research is called the Prompt Report, and over 76 pages, it surveys 1,500 papers on prompting and looks at over 200 different prompting techniques. Now, unfortunately, the research doesn't have the full gospel truth on kind of which prompt is always the best or how to always increase prompt performance. However, it did find that right now, few shot prompting, as in providing at least a few examples when you prompt, using chain of thought reasoning, where you encourage the model to show its reasoning step by step, that can perform the best in the limited tests the researchers did. Though they do emphasize that much more research into actual prompt performance needs to be done, and performance significantly varies depending on the task or the model. However, in a related interview about the report, Sander Schulhoff, who is the founder and CEO of Learn Prompting, gave 6 pieces of advice to improve the results you get from few shot prompting. And these are pretty helpful if you're doing any type of prompting along the lines of the marketing and business use cases we talk about all the time on the podcast. So, just very quickly, he says generally, including more exemplars, that's kind of the fancy term they use for well selected examples of what you're trying to do. More examples typically improves performance. Again, not always, it's a little bit art, a little bit of science. Randomly ordering your examples can, in some cases, help because it reduces the tendency of the model to bias towards certain ones. For instance, if you were showing it both positive and negative examples of the outcome you want, actually grouping those by positive and negative could force it to be biased towards one or the other. You definitely want a balanced representation of the different outcomes you're trying to achieve with your examples. You want to label them as correctly as possible. You want to choose a common, consistent format for your examples. And finally, when possible, you want to use examples that are similar to the test instance you're asking about. So basically, making your examples very close to what you're trying to do can help you improve performance. Now, if you fail to do all these things, it's not like your prompt is going to totally fail. This is just a way to get some better results. So, Paul, this certainly so far as I've seen looks like the most comprehensive review yet of kind of the literature out there on prompting, possible ways to prompt better. Like, what did you take away from this report?
I thought it was great. One takeaway for people is the models are weird. Like
Mhm.
we still don't really know why they work. Like some of the leading researchers continue to be surprised that you can just give these models all this data and they somehow make all these predictions about the next token or word in a sequence, and they do it in this really comprehensive and intelligent way. So we have to realize that this is all still pretty new. Like us humans interacting with these machines and learning how to talk to them. It's still pretty new. Um, it does demonstrate that prompting ability still matters. So
Mhm.
while I am a big believer that eventually it becomes less and less important for the average knowledge worker to be able to prompt this way, right now it is still highly relevant. It is a differentiator. It's a competitive advantage to be able to talk to the machine and get a better output from it. Um, I think this demonstrates the importance of onboarding, education, and training that we just talked about with the Chevron example.
Yeah.
So imagine day one, you're a Chevron employee or brand X, whatever the company is, and you are given a license to Copilot or Gemini or Anthropic Claude or ChatGPT Team or whatever it is. And day one with that license, you have a 1 hour training course. And that 1 hour training course synthesizes how to prompt the machine. And it gives you 10, 15, 20 examples relevant to your daily workflow of how to craft prompt. You cannot tell me greater value won't be unlocked from those platforms if training like this was provided to people. So I think that by reviewing this document, you realize there is an art and a science to this. And if we give that knowledge and capability to people who have these tools, you're going to unlock greater value for them. The other thing I note is I didn't read the entire document, but I spent a good amount of time going through it. My overall thought is it's not overly technical. Like, I wouldn't be intimidated for anyone who's interested in this to go read it. Now, there is technical aspects to it. I would consider it probably intermediate level
Yeah.
education. Um, but you can definitely get through it and take a lot of learnings away from it and even skim past the overly technical stuff and just zero in on some of the key takeaways that you already highlighted, Mike. The other thing I will say is if you take the 30 to 60 minutes to read and understand this report, you're going to be ahead of 99.5 to 99.9% of the professionals in your field. So if you can understand this and apply it, and if you're an attorney or an accountant or an HR professional or a CEO or a marketer or a salesperson or a customer service rep, whatever it is you do, if you can understand this and apply it to your use of these technologies, you're going to be ahead of everyone in your field, basically. And that's very powerful. Like, as you're looking at your career potential and the value you can create in your organization, something like this is time really well spent to understand the fundamentals. Like, even when they just break down the components of a prompt into giving it a directive, giving it examples, telling it the format you want in the output, giving it instructions on style, giving it a role, like what is it supposed to be? And then providing any additional context. Like, if you just do those things, then you can be way ahead. The other thing I'll say, and we talked about this on some recent episodes, is if you're using Anthropic or Google or ChatGPT or Runway for video, search for, and we'll put them in the links, the prompting guides provided by those organizations. So
Mm.
while there are universals that do seem to work across models because they're generally trained on similar or the same data in many cases, so the prompting styles seem to kind of work across models. There are nuances to them. So go read the Anthropic prompt library. Look at their, Sheets prompting tutorial. Go to Google Gemini and get their prompting guide on a quick start handbook for effective prompts. Read the Runway guide. Like, there are some resources provided. And then the last thing, and again, Mike and I try and avoid the podcast being promotional, like outside of the upfront, like promo for, something we do these days. We don't really talk too much about what we provide, but we did actually recently introduce a prompting for professionals workshop for this specific reason, because that was the number one thing we kept hearing from people is we don't know what to do. We don't know how to guide our team. So we actually offer a new workshop where we'll go in and teach people the art and science of prompting, create a collection of template prompts that teams can use to immediately apply to their workflows. But you don't have to use us. Like, you can go to smarterx.ai and learn more, click on workshops, and you can learn more about it. But there's tons of resources out there for this stuff. Just find people you trust who can help you with prompting and give it a go. Like, even if it's a free resource or reading these guides, but there are also professional solutions like Mike and I would offer through workshops. But find people who can help you do this if you don't have the time to do it yourself, because this is very valuable to your team.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. After having gone through this entire report, I've already got to-dos listed out to go through it a second and third time because it is, like you said, the highest, I think, value use of your time in terms of what you get in terms of ROI. Because in all the workshops and engagements that we do, I can tell you I don't see 99% of people getting anywhere close to doing prompting as well as you can do it after reading this report.
Yep. Yeah, and the other thing I'll tell you, and Mike, I know you've done this, go build like a GPT in ChatGPT, or go build a project in Anthropic and experiment with variations of the prompt, like these different
Yeah.
components they take. It is shocking sometimes how talking to the model differently, like the prompt you provide, the system prompt, how it affects the output. And it's 100% true that examples are critical. Like, I have built a GPT where I didn't have examples, and then I said, no, I want it to be like this, and boom, it nails it. And then it
Yeah.
improves the example I gave it. So we say this all the time. You have to experiment with these things. You cannot just go in and click the help me write button in Gemini or in Copilot and think you're going to get value, or take an email and say, change the tone to be, more professional. That is like so surface level right now. And that, again, is the fault of the technology companies selling the stuff, that they're not, really teaching you how to prompt in ways that matter to you. And the companies that are enabling these licenses at $30 per user per month and then questioning the value,
Right.
just do the basics, like have a plan, teach them how to prompt, give them use cases.